They handcuffed a black female Navy SEAL sniper. Then the Admiral walked in and the court went silent. They dragged her into court in handcuffs, a black female Navy SEAL, accused of betraying her country. Reporters called her a traitor. The world turned its back. But just when the judge was about to read the charges, the doors burst open. An Admiral walked in, and what he said next silenced the entire courtroom. Visionary Steps 09. Hit subscribe for more jaw-dropping, true-style stories. It was supposed to be a normal day in court. A routine hearing. A closed-door military tribunal. Nothing special. But the moment she walked in, the entire courtroom froze. Handcuffed. Head high. Eyes forward. The double doors swung open with a heavy echo, and in walked a tall, powerful black woman in an orange prison jumpsuit. Her shoulders were square, her expression calm. Yet something about her made the air shift. The light caught the steel of the handcuffs, but it was the shine of her military-style dog tag that drew every eye. The bailiff instinctively took a step back. The court reporter stopped typing. Even a murmuring crowd fell silent. This wasn't just any woman. She was Lieutenant Commander Aaliyah James, a name whispered with awe in elite military circles. A Navy SEAL sniper with a resume that read like an action movie. Over 50 confirmed missions behind enemy lines. Trained in 5 languages. Top of her SEAL class. And the first black woman ever to serve in the Navy's most secretive counterterrorism unit. But today, the headlines didn't call her a hero. Today, they called her a traitor. Reporters crowded in the back of the courtroom, clutching their pens and whispering headlines to each other. A decorated soldier falls from grace. Top Navy sniper charged with treason. National hero or double agent. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but outside the courthouse, every news channel had gone live. Inside, the tension was suffocating. No one could believe it. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others stared in silence, hoping for some kind of explanation. And then, the whispers started. She betrayed her team. They said she leaked intel during a covert mission. She's facing life, maybe even execution. But if Aaliyah James heard any of it, she gave no sign. She walked straight to the defendant's chair, every step measured and proud, her gaze never dropping. Her posture was military perfect, not defiant, but unshaken, as if the courtroom couldn't break her, as if no prison could contain who she really was. Even in a jumpsuit, she radiated authority. 2 armed military police stood on either side of her, as though they expected her to run or resist. But she didn't flinch. She didn't need to. The weight of her silence was louder than a protest. She sat down, hands cuffed tightly in her lap. You could feel the whole room wondering the same thing. How could someone who gave everything for her country be accused of turning against it? Just then, the side door opened and the judge entered, files in hand. A stern-looking man with decades of courtroom experience. He took one look at Aaliyah, adjusted his glasses, and sat behind the bench. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced. The rustle of papers, the shuffle of chairs, the low hum of anticipation. And then, something happened. A noise from the back. A shift in the air. Everyone turned toward the door. The atmosphere changed again. No one knew it yet. But what was about to happen would flip the entire trial on its head. The real story hadn't even begun. Because sometimes the loudest moments start with a single, silent stare. And in that moment, Lieutenant Commander Aaliyah James didn't look like a prisoner. She looked like someone who already knew the truth was coming. And that when it did, it would silence the entire court. To understand why Lieutenant Commander Aaliyah James now sat in a courtroom in handcuffs, we have to rewind 3 months earlier to a mission no one was supposed to know about. It was deep behind enemy lines. A classified black ops mission, so secret even half the Pentagon was left in the dark. Officially, her unit wasn't even in that region. But in reality, Aaliyah had been deployed to extract an American scientist, one believed to be developing a revolutionary piece of tech that, if captured, could turn the tide of future warfare. But something went horribly wrong. According to the official report, Aaliyah had disobeyed a direct order from Central Command, gone off the grid during the mission, and allegedly shared classified intel with an unauthorized source. Words like leak, defection, and espionage suddenly filled her file. The brass moved quickly. She was immediately suspended, stripped of her clearance, and placed under investigation. But that's not what her team remembered. "She saved us," one of her fellow SEALs whispered to a military journalist. "I don't care what the report says. Without her, we'd all be dead. She did what command couldn't or wouldn't." That team member later disappeared from public view. Transferred. Silenced. And the rest of the unit? Not a word. It was like they vanished from the system altogether. As the days passed, the story became murkier. And then, one night, they came for her. It was 2:13 a.m. Aaliyah had been asleep in her off-base apartment. No lawyer. No warning. No arrest warrant shown. Just a knock. Then the crash of boots, the snap of cuffs, and the cold muzzle of a rifle in her back. They dragged her out of her home like she was a fugitive, not a war hero. Neighbors watched from windows. Her medals still hung on the wall behind her. The next morning, her face was splashed across the news. Navy SEAL, sniper, charged with treason. Photos of her, in uniform, flashed next to the word traitor. The same media that once hailed her as a legend now whispered betrayal. But inside the detention center, Aaliyah remained silent. She didn't protest. She didn't beg. She didn't even ask why. Because deep down, she already knew this wasn't just about her. Someone, somewhere, wanted her gone. Buried. Silenced. And not because she had done something wrong, but because she had done something right. Now, 3 months later, she sat in a courtroom surrounded by cameras and reporters. Every word spoken would be broadcast, every glance analyzed. The trial was meant to be swift, a formality, a display of discipline. But they hadn't counted on one thing. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was power, calculated, purposeful, because Aaliyah James wasn't just sitting there waiting to be judged. She was waiting for the truth to come out. And when it did, it wouldn't just clear her name. It would expose the rot at the highest levels of command. But for now, the world only saw one side of the story. They saw a hero on trial, a decorated sniper labeled a traitor. And yet, if you looked closely, you could still see it in her eyes. Not fear, not regret, but the calm certainty of someone who knew justice was on the way. The judge cleared his throat, his voice echoing through the tense courtroom. "Lieutenant Commander Aaliyah James, you are hereby charged with..." Boom! The doors at the back of the courtroom slammed open with thunderous force. Everyone flinched. Heads turned in unison. For a moment, it was unclear who had stormed in. Then, gasps rippled across the room. Striding through the doorway was Admiral Charles Preston, the highest-ranking officer in the United States Navy. A man whose name alone carried weight in every military. A living legend. Decorated. Feared. Respected. And he hadn't stepped foot in a courtroom in over 2 decades. Even the judge blinked in disbelief. "Admiral Preston," he muttered, standing slowly. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" But Admiral Preston didn't respond right away. He didn't slow his steps. He walked straight down the aisle, every stride deliberate and commanding, the medals on his uniform gleaming under the courtroom lights. No one dared stop him. Not the bailiffs. Not the guards. Even the prosecution sat frozen, jaws slightly open. He reached the front, placed a thick, sealed folder on the judge's desk, and finally spoke. His voice was steady, calm, but carried the weight of an entire institution behind it. "Your Honor," he said plainly, "this trial is over." The entire courtroom went silent. It was as if time had paused. Whispers started in the back. Did he say over? What's in that folder? Why is an admiral here now? The judge tried to compose himself. "Admiral, I don't believe you have the authority to—" "I do." Admiral Preston interrupted, his tone still respectful, but sharp enough to cut steel. "This folder contains declassified Pentagon documents, effective as of this morning. I have orders from the Secretary of Defense." He turned toward the crowd, his voice louder now. Lieutenant Commander Aaliyah James was not a rogue agent. She did not leak intelligence. She was operating under direct presidential authority. Her mission was black ops, Off the books, eyes only. He placed one hand on the folder. She didn't betray her country. She saved lives. The scientist she rescued, now home. The team she led, alive because of her decision-making. And the unauthorized contact the prosecution cited, that was a pre-approved deep cover operative sanctioned by the Pentagon itself. The room fell into stunned silence. A few reporters gasped audibly. The prosecuting attorney turned ghost pale. The judge, visibly rattled, opened the folder and skimmed the top pages. His eyes darted back and forth, absorbing the truth. Is this real? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Preston nodded. Verified and signed off this morning. This trial should never have happened. But she couldn't speak about her mission. She took an oath to protect the operation, even at the cost of her own freedom. Then he turned to Aaliyah, his voice softened but filled with reverence. You followed orders. You made the call no one else had the courage to make. You protected your team and your country. And now you're free. A hush spread over the courtroom. And then slowly, one by one, people began to stand. Not out of obligation, not out of confusion, but out of respect. In that moment, the narrative shattered. She wasn't the villain they thought she was. She was the hero they didn't deserve, but desperately needed. As Admiral Preston stood before the stunned courtroom, he opened the folder and began to read aloud, revealing the real story, the story the world wasn't supposed to hear. 3 months ago, Lieutenant Commander Aaliyah James was deployed on a classified Tier 1 Black Ops mission in a hostile region, codenamed Operation Silent Echo. The goal? To extract an American physicist who had been kidnapped by a rogue militia rumored to be building a next-generation weapon. The mission was considered impossible. Too dangerous. Too deep. Even SEAL Team 6 had declined it. But Aaliyah volunteered. Not because she had something to prove, but because no one else could pull it off. She was inserted into enemy territory with a small strike team under total radio silence. No backup. No drones. No room for error. But somewhere in the shadows, the mission was compromised. An informant inside U.S. Command leaked the drop zone. The team walked straight into an ambush. Their exfil route was blown. The pickup chopper was destroyed. 2 men were injured. And the scientist, still trapped behind enemy lines. Back at command, orders were clear. Abort the mission. Leave the area. You're compromised. But Aaliyah made a different call. One that would change everything. She broke protocol, rerouted her team through hostile mountain terrain, and made contact with an undercover operative embedded in the region. An agent so classified, even most generals didn't know his name. With his help, Aaliyah led her team through 36 hours of brutal, non-stop movement, dodging mines, evading thermal drones, and fending off 2 direct attacks. No sleep, no food, no guarantee of survival. And yet, she made it. Not only did she retrieve the scientist, but she got every single member of her team out alive. It was supposed to be a triumph, a moment of glory. But when she returned, instead of being celebrated, she was silenced. Because by breaking orders, even to save lives, she had embarrassed high-ranking officials who had already marked the mission a failure. Worse, the fact that she used the assistance of an unauthorized operative created political exposure. The kind of thing bureaucrats feared more than bullets. So what did they do? They buried the truth. They scrubbed the mission logs, rewrote the reports, and they made Aaliyah the scapegoat. When she was arrested, she said nothing. Because the mission was still classified. Because the agent she worked with was still in danger. Because her loyalty to her oath, to her country, was more important than saving her own name. She was ready to take the fall if it meant protecting lives. But Admiral Preston had had enough. He fought behind the scenes to get the operation declassified. He demanded transparency. And now, standing in front of the court, he delivered the truth like a hammer. This wasn't a case of betrayal. It was a case of unmatched courage, integrity, and leadership. Aaliyah James hadn't failed. She had done what every true soldier is trained to do. Complete the mission, protect your team, and never leave anyone behind. The courtroom was silent. Even the prosecutor looked stunned, flipping through the documents. And as the truth settled in, one thing became clear to everyone watching. Lieutenant Commander James didn't just survive the impossible. She redefined what it means to be a hero. For a moment, no one moved. The judge sat stunned, his hands resting gently on the declassified file. The courtroom, once buzzing with judgment and rumors, now sat in humble silence, as if the walls themselves were absorbing the weight of what had just been revealed. Then, without a word, the judge slowly reached for his gavel. He looked directly at Aaliyah James. His voice, though usually stern and commanding, was different now. It was filled with something deeper, something human. "Lieutenant Commander James," he began, "on behalf of this court, and perhaps this nation, I offer you an apology." He turned to the bailiff. "Remove her cuffs." The officer hesitated. For a second, it was like he didn't know what to do. Then, with shaking hands, he unlocked the restraints. The click of the cuffs dropping to the floor echoed through the room like thunder. And then, one person in the back stood, a young woman in civilian clothes. A law student, maybe. She placed her hand over her heart and started to clap. Soft, slow, alone. Then a second person stood, then a third. And within seconds, the entire courtroom, every seat, every row, was on their feet, clapping, cheering, saluting, realizing what they had almost buried. Even the judge stood up, placing a hand over his chest, nodding with pride. It wasn't just respect. It was recognition. They weren't just honoring a soldier. They were acknowledging a sacrifice they couldn't begin to understand. Aaliyah sat still for a moment, absorbing it all. Then finally she stood, not with arrogance, not with revenge in her eyes, but with quiet strength. She turned to Admiral Preston, who gave her a slow, respectful salute. "Welcome home, Commander," he said. She nodded once. No words needed. As she walked out of the courtroom, a free woman, a vindicated warrior, reporters flooded the steps outside. Cameras flashed. Microphones shoved forward. But Aaliyah didn't stop. She didn't need to. Her story had already been told, and the world had just learned a powerful lesson. Sometimes, the ones we chain are the very ones who carried us. Back inside, the judge closed the folder and whispered to his clerk, "This story will be taught for years." And he was right, because from that day forward, the name Lieutenant Commander Aaliyah James would no longer be associated with false accusations, but with honor, loyalty, and unshakable courage. They tried to bury her with silence, but the truth spoke louder. Lieutenant Commander Aaliyah James didn't just survive, she made history. And now, the world knows her name. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Visionary Steps 09 for more untold stories of courage, justice, and strength. Until next time, stay bold, stay visionary.